This idea has been in my head for so long and I am happy they turned out so well. Gravity Falls Journal Cookies. These are chocolate cookies with caramel pudding in between as the pages. Let's check out how we've made them. If you have watched our Stranger Things cookie video, you'll recognize that I made the same cookies. I used my Moo cookies recipe, but softened it with less flour in the dough, cause we want to spread it without any problems. The recipe will be in the description below and the card to the OG recipe is up here. As I don't want to cover the cookies completely with fondant, I want to match the color of the journals as closely as possible. So here I have a little reference and add a bit of cacao and the tiniest bit of red food coloring to get that reddish tint. After netting and checking and netting and checking, I added about double the amount of cacao compared to the start. You have to test for yourself to get the right color. If I had used only cacao, I would have gotten a color like this one on the left here. Now to roll out the cookies. First some flour on my work surface, the dough, and of course some baking paper to make the surface smooth. The journals are pretty old, but still I want to stress out the surface only as much as I want and not as much as the dough wants to dictate me. That's why I'm going over it one last few times without the paper, just a tiny bit. Then I'm taking my print out and cut it as neatly as I can. I know the cookie will change its shape a bit because of the lifting off and such, so I try to keep it as close as possible. I even tried to use the dough scraper to lift off the cookies without harming it too much. For the sides, I cut out a few longer pieces at the length of the journals. I didn't worry about the width of them that much as I made many of them to have a few alternatives. Then it is time to make the golden hands. I cut the hand out of the print I had and rolled them into a fairly thick yellow fondant. I don't know how visible it is to you, but I was able to see it quite well and cut it out as precise as I could with my trusty X-Acto knife. I could have held the template in place and then cut around it, but as it has many deep and narrow corners, I thought it wouldn't be as precise. Try which technique works out better for you. Before the cookies were even ready, I thought I'd make the corner facets or whatever they're called for the journals, but ended up scrapping them as they were just not as useful when they got just slightly dry. When the hands are all cut out, I get my golden luster dust and with a few drops of food extract, I paint them gold. I didn't like the first ratio of dust to extract, so I added more of that dust and ended up spreading that to all the other fondant hands. While I let the hands dry a bit, I make the pudding and spread it into a glass tray I have. Like this, I got a nice thin layer of pudding to put later in between. The link to the pudding recipe is in the card up here and will be in the description below as well. Once that was done, the hands needed the numbers. I got my thinnest brush out and drew the number on with a tad of water, then just pressed the black fondant snake onto it. Cut off the excess and it's done. I do the same for the other numbers as well. And don't worry if some of the luster dust gets lifted off as the black will cover it anyway. If you don't want to fiddle around with fondant snakes, you can of course use some food marker. I got this black one and just drew the 3 on for you to see. I don't like it to be honest, but if you plan to make many of these cookies, this way you'd get more done faster for sure. With my reference pictures open on my PC here off screen, I cut off the part that is torn away from the first journal. Then with some melted white chocolate, I glue on the hand a bit of center, cause the binding of the journal will be added as well. I used white chocolate, but of course you can use any other chocolate or icing or just a tiny bit of water to keep it in place. With the water and icing, you'd need to wait longer for it to stick completely though. For the corners of the journal, I cut off fresh pieces of yellow fondant, put a dab of white chocolate and put it right into its place. Then I push in with a round tool a bit for the facet or whatever you call that, and do that for the other corners as well. But before that, I want to give the journal a more distressed look with a thin layer of white chocolate around the torn corner and all over. I repeat the same steps for the second journal as well. And as I need 4 of those corner thingies, I just cut out a round shape of fondant and separate it into 4 pieces. You can of course use a round cookie cutter, but to be honest, I was just too lazy to get up and get mine out of the drawer. Laziness for you. Again, a few drops of chocolate to attach, and I realized that I put them on the wrong way. Yeah, that happens if you're somewhere else with your mind. So I corrected that, poked my indentations, and moved on to the next one. I just repeat the same things to remove a bit of the excess chocolate between the fingers. As I forgot to make the distressed places, I make first the one for the second journal and then for the third one. Now that the chocolate has set, I can brush on my golden luster dust color thing mixture to all the corner pieces. I didn't film this part, but I approximately cut the pudding to the size I wanted and tried to lift it off with first a broad knife, which failed a bit as you see here on the right cookie, but then I just used my biggest offset spatula, which worked pretty well as you see here. I didn't put any chocolate between those, but you could totally do that to avoid the pudding making the cookie soggy. But as we are gonna eat them directly, I just didn't see any need for that. Now for the spine of the journals. I put on some chocolate onto the whole piece, put the upper part of the cookie onto the pudding and hold the spine a bit so that the chocolate can set. As this spine cookie wasn't completely even, I needed to add a bit more chocolate so that it would stay more secure. With the second one, I directly added more of the chocolate to be safe, and I didn't need to hold it as long as the other one. For our final touch, I'm rolling out some yellow fondant and cut them into stripes. Then I add a thin line of white chocolate and put those stripes onto the journal. Cut off the excess and then repeat. Then it gets some gold as a final step and we're done. I'm so happy how they turned out. I was planning and thinking quite a bit, but I wouldn't have thought they'd turn out this good. Dipper, 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 wake up! What's the matter, Mabel? Wait, I'm a sock puppet again? And you too? The journals. They've become cookies! This is Bill's doing. We need to get out of here. Help! Look, there's a camera. Yeah, I see it. What's that card saying? Ask for likes, comments, and subscribers? Is that some kind of riddle? Maybe we should just do it. Like this thing? Comment and subscribe, and maybe we'll get turned back to our old selves?